Was that supposed to be here? I wasn't sure if she was going to come or not. She hasn't, or she didn't.
It looks like them.
Yeah, I think she's going to do the third part. Yeah.
I'll take that one.
So. Yeah, the mic's good to go. Yeah. Is that going to go away? That will once we start. We're still in the practice session. He's on vacation. I guess I'll go ahead and start. So people can turn it. Oh, there we go. They read their minds. Share with this. Just
Not on your life.
Can we bring another chair up?
Not on
A chance. How are you? Good to see you.
Well, man, it took a little while, you know. They're really further than I was. And I was going
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Chang, Chair of the Continuing Education Workshop Series, and on behalf of the committee, welcome to tonight's program, Being a Good Neighbor, Revitalization of the Grove and Cortex Districts. Thank you for joining us in person and at the Carpenters Hall and online from wherever you are. Fred Rogers, a man who once asked if we could be his neighbor, left us with this quote: "We live in a world in which we need to share responsibility. It's easy to say, it's not my child, not my community, not my world, not my problem. Then there are those who see the need and respond. I consider those people my heroes. In a world of problems, all of us are trained problem solvers. At our core is a drive to seek out what our clients and our communities need and how to respond to them. In this way, all of us are not only Mr. Rogers' neighbors, but also his and each other's heroes. Tonight, we have three fellow heroes who will present their tales of two districts. They will discuss the events, people, and projects that change the trajectory of those neighborhoods, and as well as those at their boundaries, and how this growth was done responsibly. Just a reminder, we have two more programs this season after this one. In March, we have Planning the Adventure, St. Louis Zoo Wild Care Park with Lindsay Gardner and James Calvin of the St. Louis Zoo. And in April, we have Living Architecture, the School of Architecture at Cosanti and Arcosanti with Dean Stephanie Lynn. And these programs are made possible by our dedicated committee. I'd like to invite Bill to let us know how you could get more involved.
Thanks, Chris. Definitely would like to have anybody who's interested get involved. We meet the last, typically the last Friday of the month. Our next meeting is Friday, February 24th. We meet at 7:30 in the morning right here in this same location. We're looking for committee members to brainstorm ideas and organize these types of programs. We plan these programs a whole year in advance, so we're already starting for next year. And any ideas that you can bring, we would gladly like to have you on board with our committee. We like to connect with speakers to our local architectural community, inspire each other to do better, in our practice and our designs, and to have coffee and donuts, or virtual coffee and donuts, because we also have virtual members who come to our committee. So we look forward to you joining us. If you're interested, please put your name on the bottom of the form, the blue form there, and your contact email, and Patrick from the AIA office will get in touch with you. Thank you very much.
I'd also like to thank Network Materials, who has sponsored all the programs this season. Greg, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Chris. I'm Greg Patterson. I'm with Negwar Door Systems, and would like to thank AIA as always for allowing us the opportunity to sponsor these programs. Something that you can jot down is Negwar Ready Door. You specify the door and supply with hardware already installed in our union shop before the doors are sent to the job site. This saves you time, labor, both of which seem in short supply on projects these days. Thanks again, and thanks for attending.
Well, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Matt Sutherland, one of our newest committee members, to give tonight's speaker introduction.
Okay, welcome everybody. I hope you're excited about this event. I know I personally am very excited because as we were brainstorming ideas this past year on different committee continuing ed opportunities, the Grove and Cortex came up, and to me, there's so much about the Grove and Cortex that's so not St. Louis, and there's so much about it that's very St. Louis. The not part of it is very interesting. I think you're going to hear a lot about how that became a successful neighborhood and community, and as you can see from Cortex, is just absolutely thriving. So let me introduce our speakers. We have Tim Gaddis from HOK. Tim has 30 years of experience at HOK. He started there in the model shop right out of college, and then went to Leo Daly for 6 years, was at KAI for a little bit, and then back at HOK, and that started his 30 years there. He was their sustainability leader for nearly 2 decades, and then eventually became one of the design leadership roles in the firm. While there as a sustainability leader, he crafted the City of St. Louis Sustainability Plan and the Green and Growing Sustainability Plan for St. Louis County. Also, Tim is an avid track cyclist. He told me that he has gotten to number 2 on the podium and is seeking a number 1 position. And I can tell you, I know Tim is an avid outdoorsman. My family was on a hike a few years ago and randomly saw this couple in the woods building these really cool wood sculptures, and reminded me of Andy Goldsworthy, if any of you guys know who that is. Great nature sculptor. And so stopped and said, oh my gosh, this looks like Andy Goldsworthy, and suddenly realized it was Tim and his wife Carolyn, who I had worked with for years. She's a renowned landscape architect here in St. Louis. But it was just such an odd opportunity to run into somebody in our field doing something so creative and so clever in the woods. And then to meet, several years later after working with Carolyn. Also tonight, we have John Mueller with JEMA. He's also my boss. John is a KU grad and also studied at the University of Copenhagen School of Architecture. Started his career in New York City, working for HOK, Hardy Holzman Pfeiffer, spent about a decade there, came back to St. Louis and was a principal at Arcturus for over a decade. And then in 2010, John, with his partner, John Emmer, founded JEMA. He is very integrally involved in all of the projects at JEMA and manages somehow to infuse some sort of Danish philosophy into everything that we do. John spends a lot of time with these two cultures mixed back and forth. His wife, Bodil, is also Danish, and they spend a lot of time going back and forth to Copenhagen and St. Louis, and it influences so much of what JEMA does in the office. And oftentimes we'll all hear, did you see what Big did? That he has a serious man crush on Bjarke Ingel. And so we hear about him a lot. He's also a chess fanatic, and you'll always see a chessboard rolled out in our kitchen. And the opportunity to challenge him a little bit is he'll walk by and make his move and expect somebody else in the office to come and make the next move. Okay, last but not least is Abdullah. He is the thread that binds this whole story together. Abdul is born and raised St. Louisan, very passionate about the city, as you'll hear. He holds dual master's degrees from Northwest Missouri State University and Webster. He was named 40 under 40 for his civic leadership as a city manager for the city of Berkeley. And he has 15 years of experience in the workforce development, municipal government, community development. And as you'll hear tonight, he's the executive director of Park Central Development, where he leads community development in 15 neighborhoods, has personally facilitated over $900 million in central core development, and he manages 4 commercial districts. He's an avid runner, and as he told me today, I'll embarrass him, I'm a fat guy that runs. And he has over 20 years of experience in mentoring and coaching youth. So I read these lists of what everybody's done, and you just think to yourself, Jesus, like, what have I done with my life? So a lot of very highly accomplished individuals here tonight. And I think their story of how they're going to talk about the Grove and Cortex and how it threads into the growth and renewal of St. Louis is very fascinating. Abdul, you're welcome.
All right.
Can everyone hear me okay? All right, I've always wanted to do this. If you can hear me, clap once. If you hear me, clap once. All right, I'll take that. All right, take that. So as he introduced me earlier, my name's Abdullah. Believe it or not, I am not everyone's an urban planner once you get into it. That's what I always say. But I'm not an urban planner by trade. I'm not an architect by trade. I'm none of that by trade. Well, actually, what I am is a person that understands people, and ultimately, how do you move systems? How do you collaborate? How do you begin to make things really come together? And how do you build consensus? And I think that's always kind of been my strength. So I'll just kind of go in a little bit about myself. I'm Abdul again. I'm executive director of Park Central Development. We're a 501(c) community development corporation, and we are a CDC, and that is a community development corporation. They look different ways, different places. You have Park Central. Here you have 3C CDC in Cincinnati. You have Oakland CDC in Pittsburgh. I know that's ironic, Oakland and Pittsburgh, but you have many different CDCs. So I want to tell you a little bit about Park Central. So the mission of Park Central is to build one where 501(c)(3), as I've stated many times. And what we do is we look to attract development into neighborhoods. And one of the things ways we do this by is to build urban, vibrant, equitable neighborhoods where everyone can live, work, and play. And I think that no matter what you do in all elements of life, what do people do? They live a place, they work in a place, and they play in a place, no matter what. And that's the human experience. If we can have those 3 things working together, you have balance in yourself, you have balance in community. But we really do these things really by these 4 tenets, and that's neighborhood planning and services. Again, I told you, I didn't start off as an urban planner, but everyone's an urban planner now. My background, also being a former city manager, I ran planning and zoning and the Board of Adjustments for the city. So I quickly got a crash course in that. But also major infrastructure projects and improvements we do. And then the administration of commercial, business, and special taxing districts, as well as we provide technical assistance to the investment community to facilitate private investment into the community. And as I stated before, when I got here, I started saying, well, you know what we're really like? St. Louis is not a weak mayor form of government, but we're like a city manager in one of these cities. We're the people that are on the ground when the trash needs to be picked up or there's a problem, we're working on it. If there's an issue any place, someone has to be responsible and wake up every day, as they say, and keep the lights on and keep the wheels moving. So that's really, as a CDC, what we do. And it's really to build these neighborhoods on those 3 pieces and those 3 premises: live, work, and play. I want to talk about a little bit about Park Central, and I think I got a little clicker thing here. I think this is what this is. The side here? All right. Okay, yeah. So we got I have a red dot. I've always wanted a red dot. So I want to talk about how Park Central, this is about Park Central. So this is Park Central's footprint. It's a pretty big area. Now, we can't do everything for every neighborhood like we do in everything, each one. Not every neighborhood is the same level of service. Believe it or not, I wish we could, but like most places, if you're understaffed, underfunded, under-resourced, you're asked to do a lot more with less. But Park Central is actually started in the 17th ward, which is in the Central Corridor. For those of you who may not know what the 17th ward is, that is the Central Corridor of St. Louis. Those neighborhoods typically consist of the Central West End, which most people know. It can also consist of Forest Park Southeast, as well as Kings Oak. That's really the Central Corridor of Midtown. When Park Central was created, we're not Park Central. We are actually the merger of 3 CDCs coming together, believe it or not. So the way it started was you had originally Central West End. So you had one CDC in this space called Central West End Midtown. You then had Forest Park Southeast Development Corp. And then you had the old McCreetown CDC. So when we look at these neighborhoods, these were 3 CDCs that were. McCreetown was now called Temple Heights, right? But as we know, and then you have Forest Park Southeast, and then you have, of course, the Central West End. These 3 CDCs came together because what happened at the time was all CDCs in St. Louis area used to receive what was called community library dollars to do a lot of planning, a lot of development, a lot of neighborhood stabilization in these neighborhoods. Unlike most cities, St. Louis is a low tax, low service city. So a lot of the things that typical planning departments would do, it wasn't being done. We're starting to see that a little bit more, but that was why we were created, was to provide some of these services within the 17th ward. And because we received Black grant dollars, one thing that happened is that the city of St. Louis actually lost all of its Black grant funding for CDCs because they were actually not administering the dollars right. So HUD said, we're going to take away all the CDC money. So now you have these CDCs who were building in neighborhoods, but they had no operational dollars for expenses. So nothing on operations side of expenses. So what happened was they were nothing. So they could not operate. Most of them were operating on the profit that they were making for their housing portfolios. And a lot of that still existed today, which is why you don't have very many CDCs left. So we all came together in this area. And I have some people on the map, on this map, I want to talk about a little bit. But one of them is WashU Medical Center, Cortex, St. Louis University. And then you have St. Louis University here, and then also the medical center here. They all decided to get together along with the residents in the neighborhood. Believe it or not, we actually had residents that were in the neighborhood who said, we're all going to work together. And I'll talk about them a little bit later, but it was some great political leadership that came together to help make this happen. So in this space, it was a great space where they said, hey, we know we need to somehow begin to continue to work together to protect the investment that we have, right? So neighborhood residents, institutions, and businesses all came together and they created Park Central. So in order to fund us initially, we were getting institutional contributions from the different institutions to help offset some of the administrative costs, because again, someone has to wake up and be in charge on a neighborhood level every day. So this is the service map. So I'll talk a little bit about our outcomes, but we became very successful with a lot of our success models in this space. So one of the things that happened is that these neighborhoods up here, and for people that don't know that, that's called the Delmar Divide. But what we did was we were asked to come into those neighborhoods and say, hey, can you help us on a neighborhood level as residents organize ourselves to be able to implement these success models? And that's exactly what we did in 2010. Now, most people don't know, 50% of our resources are actually expended across Delmar in these neighborhoods, in these 3 neighborhoods right here. So we want to move on with the next piece. I want to talk a little bit about the outcomes, and I'm going to kind of start moving through some of this. Just our 21-22 outcomes, it speaks for itself, I think, and I'll just highlight a few things, but we provided over 500 hours of community engagement and technical services to our neighborhoods, and 400 of those hours were in Delmar. And people may say, well, what is that? Hey, what do you all do in tech? I mean, that sounds good, those numbers are impressive. Well, the first thing we do is we work with the actual neighborhood associations and leaders and residents in the community. And and we help them create systems so they're able to manage development and monitor development of their development. So we'll help them to set up development review committees. So if you want to do a development in that space, we have a process where we have a three-headed monster. It's a local elected official, it's the resident that's in the community, and then it's Park Central. And what we do is we help them to create a process that vets development in those areas. So we'll also work the process based on the planning. They're going to have social use district, they have a certain project. We help them to do that. Now, we just don't do it for them. We literally will teach the residents and teach the neighborhood associations, put those systems there on a neighborhood level so that they have voice in that space. And I did want to highlight that. And it's been successful. And that's the same success model that was created in the Forest Park Southeast. And in the city of saying that it's something to foster development along with institutions. So I want to move forward a little bit. We provided direct services to over 3,000 residents. Excuse me. Oh, sorry about that. We provided over 300 residents with direct services in our footprint. We provided over $1 million in direct anti-displacement assistance to residents in our service area. One of the things that I will hit on a little bit later, when you do development in areas, you have to have a sense and you have to have a way in which you can make sure that residents are not being displaced. Some of this early work was done, believe it or not, by Washington Medical Center. They ran a lot of those programs in the area. But as a CDC, one of the things that we understand is that when you have development, you have to always have anti-displacement tools in place. For one, A, let people stay in those communities, and B, participate in the economic revolution that's going on in that space. I think that's key, that's responsible, and that's really the foundation of what we do. As far as saying, I have a goal that every dollar of development that's done, we want to be able to do at least 50% of development. Anti-displacement work. Of course, we don't get there. That's a very aspirational goal, but it has to be big in order to get there. So we also created the city's real estate tax assistance fund. We secured over $1 million. And what that does is if there's a home that has an owner-occupied home that has a judgment, what we will do is we will pay that judge off if those real estate taxes go up so they don't lose their home. Last year, we piloted the program, we had 68 homes in 4 months, so that's great work. And that's a combination of just some of the CDCs do. And I'll continue to go on through the presentation, but I do want to hit just a few more things. We also administer commercial districts that generate over $200 million in sales. So I'll move on to the next one because my time is going.
Stand right in front of that camera. Some of the people want to see your face.
Oh, right here. All right. All right. Hello, world. So I'll talk to you and I'll talk to my 3 or 4 people that are on here. It probably is my mother too. So the question becomes, how do we get here? That's the big question. How do we get here? How do these neighborhoods begin to grow, right? How do we ultimately get here? How are we in a place where, since I've been here at Park Central, our CDC has helped to facilitate by working with developers, doing planning, working projects through the pipeline. In a 14-year period, we have helped to facilitate over $9 billion of development in this space. The question becomes, how does that happen? Well, it isn't just Park Central. I wish I could take credit for it, but I wish I could. But I do have to really talk about how this happened. And the first way this happened was with leadership. We get to be the recipient. Yes, we get to work in this space and we are a part of the story. But the big thing is responsible leadership and integrity in the process. So got to talk about this man. If you're from St. Louis and you don't know this man right here, this is somebody who you have to know. And I have to give credit where credit is due. Dr. William Danforth, Uncle Bill, as they called him at WashU. He was Chancellor of WashU from 71 to 95, and he is what I like to call the anchor of this region. In 1973, when medical centers were going out west, people were looking to leave. But for him saying, we're not going to leave. Barnes, BJC, we're going to stay here because if we leave, it will put a hole in this city that it can never recover from. But if we stay, we have to start putting resources into the communities that are directly adjacent to us. And that was how WashU Medical Center Redevelopment Corp started in 1973. But for him, this does not happen, which takes us back to leadership, leadership, and integrity. I've never heard a bad story about him. And I've seen him. And I think that's the key. And I know I'm pausing and I may be talking a little bit about him a little too much, but for him, this does not happen in this space. And he made that decision. So he is the anchor of this region. He is someone, but for him, this city would not be where it is at. And he's the one that put this in motion. So when you talk about the Central West End, WashU started to put programs in place called the Live Where You Work program, where they would give that time $10,000 for people to purchase a home. In Forest Park Southeast, they started talking about that program as well. They implemented, you can now get $12,000 to buy a home in that area. But what they also did was put millions of dollars in safety and security and infrastructure in these communities in that neighborhood. But also one of the other key things that they did was a lot of the industrial that was being abandoned in the 80s and the 90s in the city, they began to buy a lot of that land up. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Second person I got to talk about is Joseph Rody, Alderman of the 17th Ward. He is the one, when we talk about leadership and really working in the space, he did something, and he can get a bad rap these days from, the millennials, we can beat him up a little bit, Joe, because he's from a different generation, but he did something that politicians normally don't do this very often, but you know what he did? He shared power and decision-making. And that was kind of where Park Central began, where he said, hey, we have to have a way in which we can have all stakeholders, not me, but residents, institutions, and businesses make decisions together, because that's the only way we get moved forward collectively. And from that framework, Park Central was really built out of that framework to say, how do we do that? So on our board, we have institutions, but we have a majority of residents on our board and business owners. So that's where people have all come together to say, when we have plans, how do we move them forward? But then also, how do we vet these programs? How do we vet development? How do we also make sure that there's a place where when we do have institutions and people are acting, as they say, very badly, the person that will ultimately stand up and say something. So, and I said all the time, yes, we do receive dollars from WashU. I said, it's public information. We received about $50,000 that help us, but we tell WashU no. If they're wrong, we tell them no. And you have to have someone that does that consistently, but they've been very good actors. I've never had to tell them no, because they always have vetted community since my time there. So, but he is the one that really brought people together to do that. And that's another thing, leadership, integrity, and allowing people to work together. So not a perfect guy, but his approach was a great approach. And that's how we got here. So snapshot of the districts. Forest Park Southeast, snapshot of the district. Forest Park Southeast is a residential neighborhood of mixed single and multifamily homes on quiet streets, along with a trendy restaurant and bars in the Grove Commercial District along Manchester Avenue. You've seen it, this sign right here, the Grove sign. That is an iconic sign. You can't go any place and not know that in St. Louis. It is placemaking and branding. So, and that was something that was done with resident input. So although Park Central were the ones who actually put the signs up in the Grove, that was actually done with input of residents to say, hey, we want to be able to do that. And traditionally, it was a blue collar kind of industrial working class neighborhood. Forest Park Southeast, known as the Grove, is comprised of 4 districts, which is Adams Grove, Gibson Heights, New Boyle, and Rankin East. And the architecture is pretty funky there now. I mean, we have, of course, the brick, I'll go backwards. We have a modern contemporary architecture. We have shotgun, 2-story historical brick homes, brown and red terracotta brick. And we have a lot of adaptive reuse in old industrial buildings. One thing that was very unique is that we actually put in what's called a historical district in that space to be able to work and have capital that can be used to support this. So those historic tax credits help to do this. This area is also under what they call historic review, that before you tear anything down, it has to be reviewed by cultural resources. And so there's some protection that will promote that. A little bit about the demographic breakdown in here. We do have the neighborhood now is of the 2020 census is 36% African-American, 8% two or more race, 46% white. So you do have a shift in the population that has come. One of the things that I do want to hit on in this is that this neighborhood actually became predominantly African-American in the late 80s and 70s. So that was a pretty new phenomenon. And as you had flight, Black flight and white flight that was occurring, people were in those neighborhoods. And of course, let's just say in 1990, when before the boom happened, or 1999, or 1998, you can get a house over there for under $100,000 brick. So, so this is a tale of how you see cities grow. They're like people, they're living, breathing organisms, neighborhood, they grow. They die and they're reborn. So I want to talk a little bit piece about who we are. We are a neighborhood of arts in the Grove. We do have our murals. We do have, of course, the Grove sign. It is home to the LGBTQ community. Always has been. If you go to the Grove, you'll see a bunch of different murals that are there, but that is who we are kind of as a snapshot. I want to talk about Cortex now because my 20 minutes is up. That's all they gave me was 20 minutes. So we'll be wrapping this up very soon. But do want to talk about public anchors and private institution is who made these people, made this district. And I got to talk about Joe Rody, of course, Bill Danforth, and for those that are here, a man named John Dubinsky, who was the chairman of Mercantile and First Bank, which is now US Bank. But these are the three people that really provided leadership again to kind of go around, hit the rounds. If you're from St. Louis, if you're not from St. Louis, if you are from St. Louis, this is a who you know type town. And when Bill Danforth comes and says, hey, we have to do something, you do it. But he really had a vision around not only technology, but science. For people that don't know, the Danforths are the founders of Purina. And because they're the founders of the Purina, that bio-life science piece was a big piece. But we had a really good opportunity to really increase that industry. And that's what Cortex did. So have to mention those three. Originally, it was called Technopolis, right? That's a very bad name, Technopolis. So I think Cortex is much better. But the great thing about this space is that there was no gentrification. Why? There was no displacement of people. Because it was old vacant. It was an old vacant place. I mean, you hear it all the time. And I heard someone say that a couple of days ago, man, all those people they took out of Cortex. Now that I'm in my early 40s, I'm starting to understand that sometimes the kids don't know what they're talking about. So, but this was an old industrial area with vacant manufacturing buildings. No displacement occurred because there were no residents that occurred. Adaptive reuse was encouraged, as well as modern design. And again, technology and bio-life sciences was the industry. But this is also meant to be an employment and job center as well. And right now there are about 6,000 people, 6,000 jobs I know that were projected to be in here by the end of the year. So these are just a few pictures of some of the old versus the new, how it looks, how it's transformed. And that is my time, but that's a little introduction of it. I hope I didn't steal too much thunder, but I wanted to give you a little taste. They're going to give you the meal and then also the dessert. So thank you for having me, everyone.
Great. Well, thank you, Abdul. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, Matt, thank you for that introduction. I got called out on a man crush I have with the Archangels, but that's probably true. My name is John Mueller and I'm the managing partner at JEMA. And tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about the convergence of 30 years of being an architect, 30 years of traveling to Denmark, and 30 years of being involved in psychology, and how all those things kind of come together in the Grove. And talking about a specific project that we did that just finished up construction, doing 6 buildings in the Grove, and how that constitutes urban renewal. So for those of you who don't know, this is an image of the Grove within St. Louis. This is kind of, I guess, west would be up. I want to make sure this. So the Grove is this area right here. Obviously, it's a very small area. It used to be called Forest Park Southeast, for those of you who don't know. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, just give you all a little bit more of a granular look at this. On the west side is Kings Highway. On the north is 40. And down here is a railroad track, which Van de Vetter kind of cuts through here. Manchester Road. When you think of the Grove, I think for a lot of people, you think of this street, Manchester. This is where the signs are. This is where a lot of the retail, a lot of the action is. And also, if you look at the history of the Grove, especially the recent history, I'd say within the last 20 years, a lot of the rejuvenation started here on this street. So what was there a long time ago? So back in the 1870s, this area was called the Prairie de Noyer, which is the prairie of walnuts. There used to be a whole grove here of walnut trees. I found an interesting book. It was a book of fiction by Henry Bornstein, and talked a lot about what's special about this area in St. Louis. And I love this quote. It says, the grandmother is in possession of a letter from her father talking about an enormous treasure hidden in the Prairie de Noyer. So I was kind of fascinated. What is this treasure, this hidden treasure that this gentleman was talking about? And I think hopefully as I go through this, this presentation, we'll see that this is kind of a hidden treasure part of St. Louis. So a little bit about the history first. So the Grove peaked, I would say, from a population standpoint in the 1950s. There was about 14,500 people in this area called Forest Park Southeast. By the 1990, it had gone down to 4,087. By 2000, it was 3,704. By 2010, it was down to 2,918. So big decline in numbers. Even as in 2010, we started seeing a resurgence along Manchester. The population was still declining. So the renewal. So really have to give a ton of credit to the LGBTQ community. The Manchester attitudes, Just John, a lot of the other establishments were sort of the first seeds of growth and excitement in the Grove. And that was something that, like I said, that was the seed, and then it sort of began to build. And then in 2010, the Grove signs were installed, and in 2020, our population is now 3,458 and hopefully growing. This is a plan that I'm going to step over here. This is the orange is a lot of new developments that have happened in the Grove over the last 20 years. This main strip here is Manchester. So this is where you have all the bars and the restaurants and the shops. But you can see a significant amount of orange. And that's a lot of the new developments, whether it's we've got Rockwell over here. We've got Adams School over here. This is Swan Development, which is a large multifamily development, a new Washington University office space over here. And then also what the project I'm going to talk about here is in the yellow. It's these 6 sites, all here in this yellow right here. So, and this filled in between Hunt and Norfolk and Taylor and Newstead. But I thought this was a good slide because it just shows, again, that there's quite a bit of development happening here. And I want to give a shout out to Abdul. Park Central. This development that I'm going to talk about, Union at the Grove, is really a partnership between Park Central, Washington University Medical Center Development Corporation, Green Street Development and JEMA. And it really came together through that partnership, the chemistry of that partnership. So what's next for the Grove? A big part of what's next is housing. And urban renewal is tough. I think as everyone, all the architects and designers here know, it's a really hard thing to do right. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about what constitutes a good urban environment. And again, having traveled a lot to Copenhagen and to other Scandinavian cities, I became really enamored and intrigued by an architect named Jan Gehl. I don't know if you know Jan Gehl, but Jan Gehl did a lot of work with Copenhagen initially. He's done a lot of work in Melbourne. For those of you who have been to New York City recently, the bicycle lanes, the closing of Times Square, and then creating a real square. There's a lot of work that Jan Gehl did with these cities. And I really love this quote. He says that I sum up that in 50 years, nobody has systematically looked after a good urban habitat for Homo sapiens, us. We have written very few books about it. There's been very little research done. We definitely know more about the good habitats for mountain gorillas, Siberian tigers, and panda bears than we know about what's a good habitat for us. So it really struck me when I was reading and researching Jan Gehl that from a psychology standpoint, there's a lot of literature about spaces and how spaces make us feel. And there's certainly a decent amount of literature in the architectural world, from Jane Jacobs to Jan Gehl, about cities and what makes good cities. But most of the literature that I think that you find is compelling is more on the psychology side of research as opposed to the architecture side. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what makes a good urban environment. And first is this idea of how do we experience the world? Part of this has come from the writings of Jan Gehl, and part of it is just reading and thinking about this issue. And I call it a misconception about perception. And oftentimes as architects, we talk a lot about what we're going to see in a building. What does the building look like? What is the building? How do we see it? What's the perspective? From what angle? From what view? But I think what we really do is when we see a building, we transfer that sight information, that sensory information very, very quickly into feelings. So when we look at an urban environment, oftentimes, particularly when let's say we go visit a city and we come back, I think a lot of our experience is how we felt about it, not what we saw. We talk about what we saw, but a lot of the experience that we have is how did the city feel? So I want to talk a little bit about this feeling, how our sight of cities transfers into us a feeling. And that got me thinking about this psychologist from England named Donald Winnicott. And he had this very interesting concept about what he called holding. Holding, I'm going to read this. The importance of the impact of maternal holding on the emotional growth of the infant would be disputed by very few psychoanalysts. However, the significance to psychoanalytic theory of Winnicott's concept of holding is far more subtle. Holding for Winnicott, and this is what I think is really interesting, is the ontological concept that he uses to explore the specific qualities of the experience of being alive. I want to repeat that, the specific qualities of the experience of being alive. So I have some slides up here. These are more physical images of holding. But when we talk about scale, from Vitruvius to Alberti to Jan Gehl, they're all subjective manifestations of what scale is. And so I very interested in this concept of scale and why certain environments feel good versus other environments. And I think there's a connection here between this phenomenon that we experience as a child, this holding phenomenon. If we think about our first experiences of being alive, the very first experiences of being alive are all extremely close. A 3-month-old child's view is only 8 to 10 inches. By the time we're 6 months, that extends to a few feet. But all the experiences that we have are close. They're holding experiences. And so when we look at scale, when we look at cities, oftentimes the proportions, if you look at particularly European cities, old cities, it's this concept, it's this quality of holding that I think is important for us to understand when we think about what's the proper scale of a city. Even the proportion of a child to an adult, we look at that proportionality is very similar to the proportions of European cities of an adult to a building. So Union at the Grove, I'm going to talk about scaling. I'm going to talk about multitude, the concept of multitude, diversity, and then gentrification. So again, this idea of scaling, where does it come from? What is human scale? What is a sense of place? I go back to this idea, the Winnicott idea of holding, that spaces that hold us feel right. They make us feel good. So the image on the top is an Alberti sketch about scale. The image in the middle, of course, we all know is the Vitruvian Man. And then the image at the bottom is this very important metric that Jan Gehl came up with, which is the magic of 100 meters. He did an analysis of most European squares, and that vast majority of European squares from Europe to Italy, from Denmark to Italy, are all 100 meters or smaller. And why is that? Well, the reason is that at 100 meters, you can see this all the way back here, we just start to see a person. And as the person comes closer and closer and closer, at about 30 yards, we start to see facial expressions and emotion. And then, of course, up close, we really start to feel, we see, but we start to feel much more at a closer distance. And so part of scale is about this idea of closeness, and in particular, as it relates to us walking on the street. So as we design buildings, one of the things we'll look at with this Union at the Grove project is, without retail, how did we activate the street? How did we activate something that's very close? Because again, what we see up close, we feel. A couple of Small is Beautiful is a great book by E.F. Schumacher. It's more about economics than architecture, but if you want, it's a great book to read about the beauty of smallness. And then Jan Gehl coined this term, too small to fail. I think everybody knows this is Pruitt-Igoe and a disaster of scale, amongst many other things, but a real true disaster of scale. You can see how just within that context, how crazy and how ill proportioned that development is or was. It lasted about 13 years. So scale is a really important thing. We're going to show this to you as I get into the buildings. The battle for quality is won at this small scale. These are two images of the Grove. Again, where the street is just so incredibly important. The other concept I want to talk to you all about is this idea of multitude or many. We had the opportunity to working with our client to do really big buildings. We had the opportunity to do one really big building. We also had the opportunity to split up the scope into 6 buildings into much smaller projects. And in talking with the developer, our client, we felt that this was really a much more powerful way to go about creating a good urban environment. So it's this idea that visually and emotionally, if we have a building here and a building here and a building here and a building here, these intersections, these are the intersections that happen on the street where I'm seeing a building, I'm seeing you, I'm seeing a friend, I'm seeing someone I want to talk to. It's these intersections that happen by having multiple buildings versus one big, large building, one big splash. A lot of that I have to give credit to our client, to Green Street, for taking a risk on developing 6 small sites. But, you know, again, another analogy to that is this idea of a forest comes about with multiple trees versus one large tree. So multitude is an important component of this. I think of this, the success of Union at the Grove. The other issue that I want to talk to you all tonight about is diversity. In diversity of architecture, this is a great quote from Guy Slay, who's a longtime resident of the Grove. One of the beauties of the Grove is its diversity, ethnic, racial, economic, sexual orientation, and it runs the gamut of perspectives and life experiences of the people who live here. So when we looked at these 6 buildings, we certainly would have been a lot easier to make them all look the same. But we decided that each of these sites was special, was unique, was different. And so our challenge was, how do we create diverse buildings, singular architecture for each of these sites, because they're relatively close together. That was a really important consideration for us, that these buildings had to be different. The sites, some were corner sites, some were mid-block sites. Some of the sites had adjacent residential, some of the sites had adjacent commercial. So each of the sites led to this idea of creating diverse buildings, diverse architecture, or singular architecture per site. And here you can see to the left, this is Levittown, one of the original suburbs in Long Island. Most of these houses were identical. And then here's a street in the Grove where we have a relatively new house here, a historic building, another new house, a historic building, and another new house. So fantastic diversity of architecture is another component of successful urban design, urban renewal. And the last thing I'm going to talk about here before we jump into the actual project is gentrification. This term was coined in the 1960s. I think it came from the gentry, the gentry class, the folks that owned all the land. And it's so hard, maybe impossible, to do urban renewal where the capital comes from outside of the neighborhood and develops a neighborhood. That's essentially gentrification. And how do we battle that? How do we deal with gentrification? One of the first experiences I had living in the East Village in New York City back in the 80s was when the Gap opened up a store on the corner. I think it was on 7th and 1st Avenue. Oh, my friends, we couldn't believe it. We thought the world was over. The Gap is coming to the East Village. Oh my God, it's gonna take over and all the mom and pop shops are gonna leave. And that's a legitimate concern. Gentrification is a very legitimate concern. And so how do we deal with gentrification? Because we wanna have investment, we wanna have new development, we wanna have new homes, we wanna have new places. But we also want to keep the existing culture, the existing buildings, the existing fabric. So I think Tim, when we were talking about this, he said, it's kind of like knowing when to stop. And that's a really hard thing to do when you're a developer. So they're not good at that. So part of anti-gentrification, and Abdul touched on this, is anti-displacement. So this image here, this is a picture of one of the buildings that we did for Union of the Grove. This is, these are apartments, 2-floor apartments, and this is an existing home. And I love this photograph because, you know, this is what right now, this is what the Grove is about. This is about the new and the old living together and being comfortable about that and recognizing the greatness about this image, the coolness about this image, the authentic quality of the urban fabric in this image. So side by side living together, the new and the old, the existing urban fabric and the new urban fabric. But anti-displacement is a huge part of how we deal with gentrification. And so a big part of what Abdul talked about, I'm going to just hit very briefly here, but 51% of the units in this development are affordable, 49% are market rate. So again, I have to give a lot of credit to our client on that. I give a lot of credit to Abdul for insisting that a lot of this new development has an affordable housing characteristic to it. The other part of these stabilization programs that Abdul talked about, things like rental and mortgage assistance, real estate tax assistance, small business grants, home repair, seasonal maintenance programs, just grass cutting and snow removal, chore helper. I know, Abdul, you talked about keeping the seniors aging in place in their houses, and utility assistance. These are all things that are not exciting architectural concepts or architectural buildings, but they're really important when it comes to how do we keep the balance of a neighborhood so it doesn't overly gentrify and become kind of a shell of its former self, but it also doesn't stay where it was, which is underdevelopment. So
And I think it's important that you mentioned that these are all, this is the active programs that are currently active right now in Forest Park Southeast.
yeah, so Abdul was saying that these programs are active now in Forest Park Southeast in the Grove. So a great combination of policy and architecture, I think, is what's needed to fight the forces of gentrification. So I'm going to get going here because I know I've got to get moving. So Union at the Grove, we started looking at this project. The buildings outlined in pink are the buildings that we built, but we also looked at housing, existing housing in the Grove, low density, medium density, and high density. So you can see the numbers up here of the housing stock and the different types of housing. These are some of the newer developments here from Chris Hulse. These are some of the new developments from Rise, but a smattering of different types of housing. And then all of a sudden we look at our client says, I've got 6 sites. 6 sites. How do we put buildings on this? What kind of buildings? So we started with this idea that on the corners, we wanted to go taller. So these are 3-story structures. And down here is actually a 4 and 3 together. The mid block, we thought, because we're adjacent to existing homes, that we want to be smaller, that we want to be only 2 stories. So we've got this idea that corners facing major streets, and also mid-block where it's a lot of industrial areas of larger buildings, we went up to 4 and 3. But mid-block here and here, back to scale. What holds us? What makes us feel comfortable? What makes us feel safe? It's often, I think, underestimated how fragile we are when we're out in an urban environment. So it started with this diagram here of the 6 sites and how the massing would work. And then as we looked at it again, this idea of scale, of breaking the forms down, but particularly at the street, particularly to create outdoor spaces and patios and roof terraces, and then also landscaping. So these 6 sites all are within sight of each other. They're all within easy viewing distance of each other, but they're all different. Getting back to diversity, they're all very different types of buildings. The material palette is primarily brick and wood. I can get into talking about brick and wood, but I don't have time for that. But these are sort of the ancient materials, right? Brick was invented 12,000 years ago. Wood has been around for wood structures almost 1 million years for us. So these are just ancient structures. These are some of the renderings that we did sort of to showcase the feeling of the buildings. Not so much 100% accurate renderings, but what evokes the feeling of the building that we're trying to accomplish. This is on Newstead. One of the things that was really important is the neighborhood initially said, hey, we want a lot of retail. We want a lot of retail on the ground floor of these buildings. And we had to say very early on, retail is not going to work off of Manchester. We could put in retail in these buildings, but within a short period of time, they're going to go out of business. So on many of the lower levels, we tried to locate the entrances and the building lobbies on the corners in a way to mimic the corner store. This is the 2-story townhouse on Norfolk. It's 2 colors of brick. This is another townhouse, 2-story on Vista, which has 3 different types of brick color and 2 different types of wood. This is on Taylor and Vista. So this is steps up to 4 stories and down to 3, but up to 4 at the corner. And this is a building that is on Hunt, which is next to more industrial buildings. So we felt comfortable going with 4 stories here. All the buildings are parked underneath. So there's a row of apartments on the ground floor, but behind the first floor of apartments is all covered parking. It's a 1-to-1 ratio for cars to apartment units. And here are some recent photographs. So this project is just wrapping up right now, but here you can see buildings 1 and 2. The idea that the corners are strong, 3 stories, and that also the entries right here are starting, like I said, to mimic some of that concept of a retail, of creating detail at the street. This is along Norfolk, the 2-story. So again, what was important here is what's adjacent to the development. Adjacent to the development is some existing 2-story homes. So this line here, we could have gone bigger. We could have done 3, 4, 5 stories here, but from a scale standpoint, it was really important, we felt, to keep these mid-block buildings low and relate to the existing adjacent context. Here you can see another shot of the existing buildings and the new apartments. They came up with some really cool names. This is Ash. Another part of this that was important to us, again, is this concept of holding these cutouts right here. The idea that when you come out of your apartment or you're going into your apartment, there's this comfort, there's this scale that greets you. It's not just a blank wall where you enter. So there's some porosity to the building as you enter it, creating that sense of scale at the street. There's another view of Ash. So site 6, which is down on Taylor. Again, one of the things we did is we stepped down from 4 to 3 down to 2. So again, not wanting to go from existing context to really up here, trying to meet the demands of the client, the developer, but also keeping the scale to where we thought it was an appropriate scale for this urban fabric intervention.
Just one other thing.
Yeah, sure.
To note.
Yeah, before man.
One other thing I want to note is on this block, you have something that I can assure you doesn't exist in any other place in St. Louis, maybe in this country. Workforce housing, affordable housing, long-term residents, at market rate, $500,000-$600,000 homes on one block. Does not exist any other place in this city. And with the additional $500,000 we're going to put in to existing residents, it's really going to create a very nice model of how all of this works together. But I wanted to note that because this is an iconic shot that really is a model for not just architecture, but revitalization and how it can be done very responsibly.
Thanks, Abdul. Yeah, and I think that's just to reiterate that point here, here's existing homes, single family, the newer construction that JEMA did, single family rise development, which is affordable housing, and then the apartments that we did here and here. So this is when you go to a city, if you go back in the day, I'm like Williamsburg, Brooklyn, or East Village, New York, where there was new and old living together. It created a wonderful dynamic. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, both from an urban fabric standpoint, as well as from an economic standpoint. This is Marshall, Site 7. Again, looking at brick and wood, having ample outdoor space. Building sort of peels away on the corner here, which one of the ideas for this was to sort of give it the look of an old warehouse. Another view of Building 7. And hopefully this will work. This is
Bottom left corner, there should be an arrow.
yeah. So these are the sites undeveloped. There was some old, very poorly maintained buildings. So this is at New Vista and Newstead. You can see the buildings going up now. There's the parking underneath. 3 stories with the deck. It's also occupiable for some of the residents. And then the new building here, the 2 new buildings forming a gateway to Vista. And this is an overall view. This is, I think, will show what Abdul was talking about, which is in this particular part of the Grove, 1880s, 1900s, 1920s, 1940s, 1960s, 1970s, 1990s, 2000s, and now, all different houses, all different buildings, all of it living together. Pretty amazing neighborhood. So we'll start with Newstead along here. Here are the buildings 1 and 2. Whoops. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to do that again. That's it. Thank you.
Oops. And Matt, thank you for the personal introductions, not just reading the bios. Given how, Matt started off introducing this presentation and how Abdul and John have both talked about the scale of people, the activities of people, I think it's important that we remember that we are all here for people, and that as architects and people in the design and construction industry, while we work with land and we work with physical elements in that landscape, everything that we do is for people, right? We're here tonight for people in a space that an architect created for that use. Cortex. So Cortex is a really great success story in St. Louis. You may or may not know that it actually means Center of Research and Research Technology and Entrepreneurial Exchange. It is an acronym. And obviously it has the relationship with our brain's Cortex too, which has great alignment. It's recognized as a global best practice. It is often studied for projects that I do outside of St. Louis innovation centers. Throughout the country, people want to visit Cortex. What is so successful in Cortex? Why did it work? And I'm going to try to take you through a little bit of just the development, the evolution of Cortex. I wish I had more time to tell stories, and I would love to do that another time, but at least I'll try to give you a flavor of how it got where it got, and then maybe set us up for a little bit of discussion about where it's going. Why am I talking about this? Well, I was fortunate enough back in the early 2000s to actually be able to do a little bit of pro bono planning work with Cortex when it was first getting formed. And since then, HOK has completed 5 core and shell buildings. We've got 2 under construction, 2 that are in design now, and 2 with some future planning. And then we've done over 24 tenant fit outs, and we have ongoing updates with a lot of those buildings. And what you'll see is that, as John was mentioning, there's a desire to have variety in the types of buildings that are built in these areas. Yes, some of the older buildings have more similar characteristics. And in Cortex's case, it's very interesting because many of the board members come from institutions, higher ed institutions, healthcare institutions, which have architectural form and aesthetic that are actually much more similar. It was desired by the Cortex Planning Committee and the NGO in general that they wanted to have something that was more organic in terms of its growth, that felt more unique as buildings came online. And even though HOK as a firm has designed each of these 5 buildings, they each look like they could be from a different source. And yes, we do have different teams that work on these buildings. It's not just one team that works in Cortex. Now, we also do these tenant fit outs. We've been really fortunate to work with tenants like Boeing or Microsoft on very site specific and globally unique fit outs. The Microsoft Technology Center, it was one of 17 in the world when it was first constructed. And then we have lots of other work that we're doing with both local and national firms. So back when Abdul was talking about technovalists, right? This idea that we might be able to stop the brain drain of people leaving St. Louis, of intellectual capital leaving St. Louis for other places that potentially had more opportunity to expand the opportunities for people and for that intellectual development. Uncle Bill and Joe and others came up with this concept called the St. Louis BioBelt, and it was basically a survey of these institutions and companies, organizations that were doing something related to life sciences. It could be ag sciences, could be bioscience, it could be technology. And there was an idea here to try to find clusters that we could actually bring together and begin to create some momentum around and build something upon. And as Abdullah mentioned, we had Cortex. We had this area of sort of post-industrial buildings, which many of which were vacant. It was often called the hole in the donut because we had good development going on all around it. And then here we had Cortex. So you could look at that as part of that glass half empty, that we just needed to fill it up, and we were able to do that. Cortex is also a tax-exempt 501c3, and it was founded in 2002 with 5 partners: Washington University, St. Louis University, UMSL, Washington Med Center and BJC, and then the Missouri Botanical Garden. And they all invested money so that we could begin to build that out and form a governance organization and structure for this 200-acre site in the middle of the city. Now, Cortex actually started before Cortex a little bit. There was a state grant that was shared to what was then became the Center for Emerging Technologies. This is 1998, the old Doris car factory, the Doris motor car factory. What was very interesting about this is that there was money that was invested to build out this older building, create an adaptive reuse, and create an incubator for life sciences and technology. And one of the lessons learned was that even though you're creating an incubator space, even though you create a core shell building and then say, hey, this is available for startups or young companies that want to come in and need space, a lot of them didn't even have money to build out their space, right? So initially, Stereotaxis took a lot of this building and then took all of it and then had to graduate out and move through buildings in Cortex, and now they've moved to the Globe building. So Dennis Lauer, the first CEO of Cortex, was a person who kind of saw this and brought in TIF financing and whatnot to actually fund the tenant fit outs for some of the startups that went in there. And now CET is more of an incubator with Cambridge Innovation Center running it. So we have this corridor, Forest Park Avenue here. And in 2006, Cortex won the flagship building to really kick off the Cortex district is completed in 2006. So it was really started in about 2004. You've got a strong spine here. However, the property is really along the Duncan Avenue spine. This intersection of Duncan and Boyle here, Main and Main in Cortex. You have projects like Soleil in 2008 on the heels of Cortex 1, and then 4240 Duncan in 2013, BJC Commons 2013, and then 4260 on Forest Park Avenue, the Cortex Commons in 2015. And then you start to grow out from that. Right. And then you start to actually grow again further out from that. So what we're seeing is building on the success and not actually pulling the momentum out of these successful buildings, but building on. And I want to refer back to that when we talk about successful growth as we see. So there's continued growth going on here, and I'll share some more of that as well. We also know that Cortex is successful because of the supporting neighborhoods, where the people who are going to live or work there live. We've got the Central West End, we've got the Grove, we've got other developments nearby. We have a Metrolink station. We had free parking for a while, which was very convenient, and now Cortex is matured enough so that we have to pay for parking. But one of the key tipping points, I'll say, is roughly in 2006, when Dennis Lauer came on board. He was the first CEO for Cortex. Cortex was thought of as a district. What is a district? It's an area of land. It's a physical place. And he said, okay, yes, those are all sort of real estate transaction-based ideas. And yes, that's what we need to develop for people. But Cortex is really a community. So he changed the name from the Cortex Innovation District to Cortex Innovation Community. And with that, the idea that there were stakeholders, both within the district's 200-acre boundary, but also outside of it. And I don't know if any of you have been to the Venture Cafe Thursday afternoon events. There are lots of people who are coming in from outside of that. WashU, St. Louis University, UMSL, Missouri Botanical Garden, their institutions are not within the Cortex boundary, but they are stakeholders, right? So we think about this sort of thinking about the community as much broader, and that actually then strengthens what Cortex is. And in fact, as Cortex marketed itself, it looked at the amenities outside of Cortex to basically say, hey, you as a company can come to Cortex and you'll have access to the History Museum, the ice rink, the movie theaters, the Grand Entertainment District, et cetera. And all of that reinforces the sort of the Cortex equation. Over time, the investment within Cortex then and the success that was building there has spurred on over $950 million of investment outside of the 200 acres of Cortex. You know, to Joe Rohde's credit and others, they saw what Cortex could be here and then and use that to help advance development outside of that particular district. And I won't read all of these, but suffice it to say, Cortex is really a success story from 2014 to 2020, bringing in $84 million of new taxes, even though we're working with TIF programs and financing tax benefits to the companies that are coming in there. Really a lot going on in a positive way. So Cortex right now, let's say, it's getting close to year 19, year 18 of its 30-year plan. These numbers are from 2019. So let's say that's closer to the 15 years, halfway through their 30-year plan. And they were pretty much on target. And then we got hit with the pandemic. Whoa, you know, things have changed a lot. And Cortex is rebounding with those with the sort of return to work and some new paradigms as well. So Cortex's mission has been updated. They're accelerating inclusive economic growth in St. Louis. It's very important that not only do they want to be a vibrant innovation community, but an inclusive economic engine. So where things were very targeted towards the Microsofts, the Boeings, the big companies, we're also looking at workforce for those companies that come in. How do we train people and make sure that the big companies that are potentially coming from the coastal areas can have the workforce that they need as we become more and more attractive? Well, housing and land gets much more expensive out on the coasts. So we have programmatic offerings. I say we because, excuse me here, I don't work for Cortex, but I'm a stakeholder too. I mean, I really believe in their whole mission and everything that is going on there. Their programmatic offerings build knowledge. They have strategic partnerships. They're supporting emerging companies. And I'll say one thing about these programmatic offerings. This is the one thing that separates Cortex from most other innovation centers. Innovation centers are places, they tend to be physical places and buildings where companies develop technology. You can do that anywhere. What makes Cortex better? What's its sort of differentiator? Well, its differentiator is what happens outside of a tenant suite, outside of a lab. It creates these reasons for people to get outside, meet other people, and then have an idea or have a relationship that is suddenly not something that they'd ever thought of. And we have a transformative leap or a paradigm shift that you wouldn't have if you were out in some suburban research park, right? So the value add in Cortex are the things that happen outside of leased areas, and it makes people pay more for their leases because they get all this additional stuff and opportunity to advance their work. As I said, there have been some milestone moments. You can see that little bump there in about 2007. As more jobs are created, that's when the idea of Cortex as a community came on board. And then in 2013, when Cambridge Innovation Center came to St. Louis into 240 Duncan, that was another enormous milestone. It was really the first large-scale co-working in St. Louis, and with Venture Cafe came these curated tech conferences, the largest regular tech conferences in the world for that matter, and it just spurred growth in Cortex. It was enormous, and you can see how that took off. So I'll go through some of these buildings just to kind of share the architecture that's going on, and I'll dig into a little bit of HOK's work a little more deeply. So we had Center for Emerging Technologies in 1998, obviously the Doors Motor Company there, and that is currently managed by CIC, Cambridge Innovation Center. It has co-working labs and co-working office space in it, about 88,000 square feet. Next, you had Cortex One in 2006. This building is about 150,000 square feet, 50,000 square foot floor plates, and you can see those floor plates on the right side there. They show multiple different ways that you could configure tenant floors. I think they were 15, maybe 16 feet floor to floor, really tall in terms of lab space. A lot of the mechanical equipment was built out there to try to pre-build and get ready for space there. It's proven very flexible, and it's in some cases second, and in some cases getting ready for its third generations of tenants there. I'll go back There was some money spent on that facade, that tilty facade that faces Forest Park Avenue. But it was an NGO. It was a 501c3, right? A not-for-profit that's developing it. So there was cost efficiency desired. And 3 other sides of that building are tilt up, right? So spend a little money on that front facade and then save a little on the back. When you're inside, you can't really tell. And it works functionally very well. DuPont Soleil in 2008 is sort of right across the street from Cortex 1. This building that was done by Canon is about 160,000 square feet. It was a single tenant building. And at the time, Soleil is doing a lot of research on soybeans. If you were to see this building in plan, it has some reference to the soybean shape. It's a very uniquely shaped building. And now that Wexford and Ventas own it, and HOK is doing some work to help make this a multi-tenant configurable building. So it's one of those, it's really cool in terms of its design. And now it'll be able to handle some multiple tenants as well as they continue to do some tenant transfer there. BJC at the Commons in 2013. This was by Forum at the time, now LJC. So that's a large building, about 220,000 square feet. The facade you see on the left is glass with glass fins, and then 3 sides of tilt up. And then pop up on that top penthouse floor with all glass as well. So once again, you see fairly efficient in terms of cost effectiveness, but then putting your bang for your buck to get that building built and make it fit its pro forma. Also going on at about that time is 4240 Duncan. This was the old Westinghouse telephone factory, very large ground floor plate and still very large upper floor plates. This building is about 205,000 square feet. And you can see those red dash squares that are over a concourse. And what we did here was we actually created these light wells that come through the space. They puncture through level 3, but they're wrapped so that we can keep our 2-story non-atrium space at levels 1 and level 2. And then that open concourse space you'll see on the lower right-hand side is where Venture Cafe is held now every other week. I think I have some images of that. CIC's main space there, they've got about 40,000 square feet in this building and lots of co-working activity there. Co-working is really important in innovation areas because that's where you get the small startups. That's where you get companies or ideas that aren't fully formed yet. They don't even know if they're going to be around in 3 months, 5 months, 6 months. So they can't afford even a 1-year lease, but they can afford a membership to have office space and conference space and an address and whatnot. And sometimes lab space. This is some of the Venture Cafe activity. So it does take place in the 4240 concourse. And I just went to a really phenomenal work session on AI, artificial intelligence there, as people are starting to really explore that. So they're always looking for leading edge topics, and it's a cool thing to go see. Cortex Commons then is also being developed at this time. This is SWT, sort of creating the hearth or the area that's, it's not the front door to Cortex, but it's at the corner of Main and Main here with that the Da Vinci shelter you can see off in the distance. This is a really great sort of partnership in design, thinking about how we can actually manage some of the infrastructural elements. It manages a lot of the stormwater in the Cortex area, and it's done in a very beautiful and functional way. You have food trucks and all kinds of events that occur around the Cortex Commons. And then as that is starting to be implemented, we also have 4260 Forest Park Avenue. This was designed by Canon as well, and it kind of picks up on that tilty facade along Forest Park Avenue. This is not a tilt-up building. It's only three stories here, but it was also developed by Cortex. And what was interesting about this one is that it held Tech Shop. Do you remember Tech Shop, the maker space that was there some time ago? So Tech Shop had 10 locations around the country, and they went bankrupt. 9 of them went away altogether. One of them partially saved itself, and that was Cortex's makerspace. That's because Cortex actually purchased all of the equipment for the makerspace so that when they lost the lease, Cortex still owned the equipment. And then working with Jim McKelvey and folks at Third Degree Glass Factory created the MADE space, STL MADE over on Del Mar. Now we've got Craft Alliance moving there. And so we've got a little makerspace corridor starting to really develop on that space on Del Mar between Union and Kings Highway. So we're seeing now stuff spawn out of Cortex. IKEA in 2016, it's a different type of commercial project, obviously, but it was a real win for St. Louis, right? And it is within the 200 acres. What's cool about IKEA, very sustainable, lots of solar energy there. The furniture that they sell actually is used by a lot of the co-working spaces, right? Because it's not the highest level office furniture, but it's what people can use quickly. And it really actually then supports the Central West End, the Grove area, and people who are looking for convenient and cost-effective living furniture. Take a little, this is not a detour, but you can see the Cortex Commons in the upper right here in Big Orange. This is the 4200 block south, or 4200 south block of Duncan Avenue. So to the right, you would have Boyle Avenue, and then Duncan is down towards the bottom. We have the Metrolink station and the Great Rivers Greenway trail up above. And what you can see here is this idea of a network of innovation spaces, right? So 4240 is that large floor plate telephone factory, and it actually has a concourse that and an entry that starts on the west side, on the right side of this image, and winds through like an L shape and comes out in what became the Innovation Plaza. 4220 Duncan, which I'll talk about in a moment, then has a two-sided lobby so that you can enter on the west side and exit on the east side. And then the new 4210 Duncan building also uses that. The idea here is not to create cul-de-sacs, but to create continual spaces that are always moved through, that there's always action and activity and no dead spaces. So 4220 Duncan, as I mentioned, that was completed towards the end of 2018 into 2019. This is 186,000 square feet, half tilt up on the left side, and this prismatic color changing facade, depending on what your angle and the angle of the sun, that really is trying to represent the transformative companies that are in it. This building, I can say, having worked closely on it, that it was about pre-pandemic, about $137 a square foot cost for core shell. That is rock bottom. And that helped the developer and landlord to create lease rates that were low enough for entry for certain companies, certain step-up companies that wanted to be there. But then they also landed a tenant like Microsoft. They landed Boeing. They landed some other big ones. And lo and behold, the building is filled up within 9 months after it opens. It has very large 38 to 40,000 square foot floor plates, and was designed to be very efficient with long slugs of column-free space. How much area can we fit on that site, and then minimize our services, like fewest number of elevators without being inconvenient, fewest number of fire stairs, and still keep that sort of two-way entry and then service that we needed there as well. It also at that time had Innovation Hall, which opened in 2018, 2019, that had the Chocolate Pig restaurant, which during the pandemic has gone away. This had conference spaces for people who couldn't even afford a membership to CIC, and then the 300 person assembly area. That whole space has now been taken over by Filament, which is a meeting facilitator. They do really cool work. They got a guy that draws pictures, during your meeting. And if you ever want to do a meeting without a PowerPoint and really get some work done, they're ones to ask. So they just recently moved into this space. So Innovations Hall, high energy, lots of different functions. Another tenant in the building that HOK did. For me, this is like a once in a decade tenant where we were able to do this. I can say this is for Boeing, they just don't want it on the images. This silver image in the upper left, we call it the liquid metal ceiling, right? So Boeing uses polished aluminum in many of its vehicles. So this is the idea that this is the clay that they make their airplanes and other mobility vehicles out of. It was CNC cut foam and vinyl car wrap, chrome vinyl car wrap. And the company that did it made a documentary movie about it because they wanted to take their car wraps beyond cars. And this really ended up working out. It's just a really cool thing. But this tenant space uses Boeing legacy parts. The reception desk that you can see there in that red slide is a 747 engine nacelle. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see a B-29 wing section under the glass area in that conference table. And then there were just other sort of pieced together 737 tail pieces that make this sort of aeroform that swoops through one of their reception lobbies. And then that drone, that's actually the drone that they use in the Star Wars exhibit at Universal Studio in Orlando, right? So the X-Wing fighter, that's actually got this drone behind it that's actually doing all of that flying. Next, Metrolink in 2018, that was a partial Tiger grant and a lot of hard work by folks. To get the extra stop here, uses the Da Vinci wing and the tensile structure as a design inspiration. Phase 1 garage. So at this point now, we have enough development that we can't just use the surface parking. We actually have to go up. And this is when parking now starts to get charged for. So the first garage was about 650 cars with the idea that it's going to be expanded with another glass stair that goes up at the elevator. You can actually see out across some of these open network of innovation spaces. And then you can see that yellow element there a little bit further east towards the grain elevator. That's the phase 2 that would come in the future. And then there is an art program once that phase 2 building gets built so that there's something that we facing towards the south that would look pretty funky. 4340 Duncan, this is the old Crescent Planing Mill building. And before that, it was the Post Dispatch. It was a printing location. So once again, large floor plates here, but they're organized around this double height space where they used to have their big printing presses. So I think it was a dozen printing presses that they had in this space. That was all kept open rather than try to max out the amount of square footage. But the biogenerator co-working lab space, incubator lab space is in the center there. And then there are elements like the office mezzanine in that lower left area and other pieces of that historic building that are kept open for BioSTL and Arch Oncology and Confluence and many of the other tenants that are in there. The Aloft Hotel came along in 2021. It was a little bit delayed by the pandemic, but finally got here so that there's actually a hotel within Cortex, along with the Wasabi restaurant to give some more sort of restaurant variety there. And then you can see on this 4200 block south how we go from 4240 adaptive reuse to the 4220 building to 4210 and then up to the grain elevator, which hopefully someday will get developed as well. I don't mean developed as in removed and developed, but I mean the grain elevator is just iconic. So this 42 or this 4210 building here, this is a larger building, 8.5 stories, big long areas of column-free space, again, organized around very efficient building. This was a little more expensive, but not that expensive pre-pandemic. And unfortunately, this building is still a go. All the site work's been done. It's just that there's been a slowdown in some of the tenants. The main financer is still gung ho on this, and there are still leasing activities going on there. So I'll share just a little video here of that. So you can see here, coming around Duncan Avenue,
I've never been so close to this here. And then right down Duncan Avenue, you can see the sort of step up from scale from the lower buildings to the taller grain elevator there. Lots of parking that we needed to have to support this building and the other areas in Cortex. And then coming back up Duncan with lots of street front activation and commercial retail there, up into the parking entry, and then this area that we call the concourse with covered activity space. This area on the right called the Grotto is a two-story sort of covered entertainment space that we created just by leaving out some of the parking, one of the parking aisles. And then as you move into the building here, since this was on the site of that metal fabrication plant, we've got a lot of metal fabrication detail within it. We saved some of the block and tackles that you'll see up here at the top of the stair. And I know that was fast. Hopefully nobody got sick, but I wanted to try that in there. Just turn it up. So, wow, Cortex has been very successful. Now we're starting to see development beyond that, right? City Foundry just recently opened up. The Armory has opened up, and that's gone through a few bumps, but it's going now, and they've got residential planned as well. WashU's neuroscience research building is going, that'll be finished in 2023, they say. So again, we'll have lots of principal researchers there, and that's going to spawn additional growth as additional companies and organizations try to get close to that research activity. Cortex K by KDG Development is at the south end of Sarah, just so you see Highway 40 there in the foreground. This is sort of the southern gateway to Cortex if you were coming from the Grove. That's got office, that's got workforce housing units in it as well, and that's pending. So residential in Cortex, yes, if that goes on, there have been studies along Duncan for other residential, but that has been a challenging pro forma to meet, especially with the lease rates that are being paid for commercial space. So there are still considerations for it. I think we'll just have to see how that works out. So that's my piece, my tour through Cortex. And what I'd like to do here is just set up a little bit idea for discussion, right? We know Cortex has worked and the Grove area have worked really well. Central West End has really got some good momentum. What is the future of our good neighborhood, right? We know that these districts share success because of each other. The Cortex, we can't have all multiple uses in all areas, and it doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. But to have the Grove, the Central West End, and other areas nearby Cortex really makes them all that much more robust. But what are the risks, right, of growth? John mentioned the challenges of an unchecked growth model, right? Capitalism means grow, grow, grow. But how do we know when to stop? How do we know that this is just right before we kick it over the edge and lose control of that momentum? Excessive growth will set some uses out of balance. If we have too much of one type or another, it suddenly becomes mono use, and we lose that integrated opportunity for people to get out and see all kinds of new things. The cost to play. Leases in Cortex are now the second highest in our region compared to Clayton, right? So how can a company that is trying to start up afford to be there? In fact, this is actually a little bit of a problem because every time developers try to create what they call step-up labs so they can get, say, 1, 2, 3-year leases, something that's smaller than a 5 or 10-year lease, another commercial entity comes in and takes the space. And is willing to pay a higher lease, and the developers say, okay, you know, that works. So we need to work to really continue with holding that sweet spot, but still growing. John and Abdul both mentioned gentrification and how we could potentially be pricing certain groups out of access to this area that we do not want to do. And then there's the location shell game. I want to talk about a couple of precedents.
The St. Louis Entertainment District shell game. People may remember Laclede Landing in the 70s and 80s, very robust. That's where you went to party. That's where you went to see bands. Oh, Union Station comes along. What a great opportunity. What a great renovation of that facility. However, it siphoned off a lot of the energy from Laclede's Landing. Okay, Washington Avenue comes into the picture. What a great development there along that corridor. Again, though, it siphons off from Union Station and siphons off more from Laclede's Landing. Then we have Ballpark Village. It's great. Yeah, we love to have this kind of developments helping to support the ballpark, but it's siphoning off from other places. Now we have the soccer district, MLS, right? What's that going to do? It's a challenge for St. Louis because we've had a limited amount of density. The city hasn't grown to just continue to feed more people at this. But at the same time, we can tell that each of these areas has not been close enough to the other one to actually grow one area, right? It's actually taken folks from one area to another. Another phenomenon that's similar is co-working in St. Louis. In 2014, when CIC first came to town, there was Cambridge Innovation Center, Center for Emerging Technologies, T-Rex in the Railway Exchange Building, and Nebula on Cherokee in the Cherokee District. So not too much going on there. CIC at that time was kind of the cool place to go in terms of large scale and being in Cortex. Now, in 2023, we have 19 locations for co-working. CIC is not growing as quickly because there are other places to co-work. That's a good thing. We want people to be able to co-work close to where their homes are or close to where other resources are. But at the same time, it's slowing growth in key areas. So this atomization of something that's successful is just something that we need to be doing sort of a both and with. And then if you remember this idea of the bio belt and looking for clusters and where they were sort of located in different parts of the region, you can see there's a biomedical district, a plant science node that's around the Danforth Center, a high-tech corridor that was out at the Missouri Research Park, which is a whole other discussion, and then the research and development node on the Illinois side. So now what we see, yes, Cortex, the Armory, the Foundry, right in the center there in the darker orange, we've got T-Rex, but now we've also got the Globe building. Really great. Squares developed that, and there's some opportunity for innovation space there too. We've got the Del Mar Maker District. We've got 39 North out at Danforth Plant Science Center area. And then with the NGA community coming on board too, that's going to be another innovation node. So the question is here, can we resist the siphoning off of one and build all of those together in very positive ways that interact. And then lastly, what could successful growth look like around the Cortex area, right? We've got Central West End, we've got the Grove, we've got this gravity around Cortex. This is all being built on the anchor institutions of BJC, WashU Medical Center, SLU Campus, and SLU Health. We've got the Grand Corridor with the Entertainment District at Grand Center. The Foundry and the Armory are easily accessible from Grand. We've got the new Steel Coat Square building and the new Target that are going in just south of the railroad tracks there. We've got the Locust District a little bit to the northeast of the SLU campus. Those are really positive. We have more housing, more residential districts that can be balanced in all the different ways that we want to balance our housing. These are, what people love about St. Louis is our neighborhoods, and these are some great neighborhoods nearby. Can we leverage those areas to then look further to the east, right? Harris Stowe, which is not necessarily a founding institution, but it is an anchor institution, and there's a lot of great diversity there. We've got MLS and Union Station. They're close enough together to be able to create some gravity. So can we potentially look at that next space in between, and instead of jumping too far, continue to sort of grow all of these pieces together in a way that that continues to build instead of siphoning off one and playing that St. Louis shell game. So I just wanted to leave you with that thought, and we've still got a fair amount of time for some questions, I think. I didn't talk too fast there. Good deal. So yeah, Matt, if you want to moderate, or I'm happy to hang up here too. But we'd love to take some questions. And if you don't have some questions, as Chris was saying, it's good to have problems. We're all problem solvers. And if we don't have problems, we create them for ourselves, right? So we'll create some questions too.
Okay. Your question. So,
Right now, they are operating grain silos. They are
you know,
owned.
Tim, I might ask that you turn the mics in front of you on just so that the people online can
And if you
hear.
could repeat the question for the people.
Yeah, we have literally more than half the audience is virtual. So.
Okay, good. So the question is, what's going to happen to the grain silos that are at? Oh, no, I just got to let go. So what's going to happen to the grain silos at the east end of Cortex? Currently, they're an operating facility, grain transfer facility. People, I say people, developers, Cortex have thrown out a question, would the owner of that land and that grain facility be willing to sell it? Sure, the price is really, really steep because it's actually a very profitable operation there. Some of you may have seen some of the crack patching that's been going on. That's an arrangement with IKEA. IKEA has actually paid for that to keep the dust that's inside of those contained. And I don't know the full relationship there, but I do know that they're working together. So those things are intact. And I can say that I know some people have looked at that. There are amazing adaptive reuse projects for grain silos across the world. I've created a 100-slide deck of those opportunities and shared them with Cortex and with others. That is such an iconic piece that to remove it in place of some other building that couldn't be seen for as far, I think would be a huge loss to our community. So hopefully when the time is right, that will be redeveloped as something and will support and enhance the Cortex and then the growth in Central West End District.
You have a question to the back?
First and foremost, thank you so much for a great presentation. For all those online, this is David Charles, Research Manager, and I have a question from Max Benberg for you all. How does SLU fit into this? Haven't heard much talk about them tonight.
But I can do a little bit about what SLU is doing in Cortex. They have a space in a 4220 Duncan building where they partnered with WashU. It's called the CoLab space, and it houses WashU's cybersecurity education division. So they have a large sort of war room that they'll do hackathons and whatnot there. And then St. Louis University has co-working offices, and at least before the pandemic, there was a bi-weekly gathering that they had there as well. They can be found in some of the other co-working spaces, but they are, WashU is really the large partner. St. Louis University is on the Cortex board. St. Louis, they're there for lots of input, but they're probably a little bit less visible.
Yeah, and just from a 30,000 foot view, to kind of echo what Tim said, if you look at the space, they're almost like the eastern buffer. And I think their role to play, this is just me as a geographer, someone who's a social scientist. I think they have a bigger role to play as we go north, particularly and towards that downtown west. That Foundry area certainly should, and the Prospect Yard can be an anchor that's going to be kind of on that space that they should be able to build from a position of strength as you go into downtown west and MLS. So just me, how do we connect where SLU is at, particularly the campus, to the not just the local business district, but also to the MLS district. And I think if we're also talking from that map, when we looked at the Locust Business District, that area, that node. I think that's a tremendous opportunity to also build and really strengthen Harris Stowe, which is an HBCU, and being able to really produce some of that talent that you're going to need. Really from a minority standpoint, because that is something that's definitely missing. But I think if Harris Stowe can be activated and somehow in partnership with SLU, there's no reason that Locust corridor can't be kind of the district that Harris Stowe needs. You see it all over, whether in Mississippi State, WashU has the loop, SLU has kind of the Grand Center, but I think that's an opportunity, which then if you strengthen Locust, you can then also strengthen that MLS stadium. So I think that that's a conversation that they're going to have, but that's just how I look at it, but WashU is the dominant in that space. And for as well.
Yeah, thought I saw a hand. There you go.
I was just curious when we were listening to talk about the Grove and all the growth there. And it's fascinating to drive through and see the new construction. But my question is regarding the gentrification. What happens to the property tax values for those people that are trying to survive in those small little homes adjacent to these other properties? Is there something to prevent their property taxes from escalating, or how do they survive?
Do you want me to repeat that?
No,
You
I
got it.
heard it. I heard it. So,
Well, just for folks online, they wouldn't have heard. The question is about the Grove, the gentrification, the top property tax values of anybody who's staying in the Grove that was there previously, what's happening to their property taxes and what's the strategy to help them stay in place?
So without a doubt, property taxes have certainly gone up in the Grove. There's no doubt about it. One of the ways that and this is where partnerships come in at, again, although we may do development, we are a CDC, so part of it is stabilization. One of the tools which we talked about earlier was the RETAF program, which is a partnership with the Collective Revenue, the City of St. Louis, Park Central Development, and Legal Services of East Missouri, as well as Prosperity Connection. But we created this fund that if an owner-occupied home is in jeopardy of losing their home due to taxes, that we will pay off that judgment and then work with that individual to do a couple of things. One, if it's an issue around just where it's a financial issue around planning and things of that nature, around money, where maybe it becomes a budget issue, but sometimes it's just a home repair issue where someone may have $1,000 a year in home repairs, so they have to choose between paying my taxes or keeping, or saving my home from being in disrepair. So a lot of it isn't just one solution. It's a multitude of those different anti-displacement tools that you have that make up the ability for people to stay in that space. But we do have those tools currently in place. We also have something in place because this success model that was developed in the central corridors, we have worked to move this north of Delmar as well, but we have something that's called the Delmar Tax Relief Fund as well. So as property values go up, this fund is in place, and that takes work. That takes someone where that's their job. And as a CDC, we do a lot of that particular work on the ground. So those tools are in place. Again, this year we saved 68 homes, and from that we did were awarded $1 million to put into that fund. So,
David, do you have another online?
I do, yes, David was AIA staff, but another online question. How much money was invested in the early stages and for how long before the market forces begin to sustain development on its own for Cortex or for Grove? And the second part, what were the initial funding sources look at private?
So I can talk a little bit about the Grove. In the Grove, a lot of the homes in the Grove initially, the market is now, of course, doing it by itself, but a lot of the initial investment in the homes, believe it or not, were done by, some of it was by WashU, some of it was where they were granted the power of 353, which gives a 25-year tax abatement. They were also giving people home repair. At that time, you had the perfect capital stack. If I could have a 25-year tax abatement because the house is worth $60,000, right? But then because it's a historic district, I can then put on historic tax credits to help me fix that home up. it's now comes down to a capital stack issue of how we maintain those homes. So that was the early days, was a combination of piecing together a capital stack for things that work, as well as NAP credits as well, to make projects work and to make projects pencil, but then also a plethora of home repair as well. So that was initially how those homes were stabilized in the northern portion of the neighborhood, which was the Botanical Heights, the Gibson Heights area of the neighborhood. To the south, what you actually had, which is different in that quadrant where you saw the Union at the Grove project, that was a little bit different. There was probably 5 or 6 landlords who owned most of the property there. So a lot of that was slum, and they were people living in very, very bad conditions. So maybe 5 or 6 landlords were huge property owners, and WashU was able to buy them out. And people say, oh, well, WashU displaced the southern portion of the neighborhood. That's not necessarily true. You had people living in very bad conditions and slumlords who were just being honest. And from that, they were able to and we worked with them on the second portion of it, but to have it where you had, 3 phases. This is the third phase, the Union at the Grove. The first phase was the affordable housing. Also, another thing that Park Central, we have another arm that's a part of our entity. It's called Forest Park Southeast Development Corp. As well with RISE, but we actually have over 300 units of affordable housing that literally sits in the Grove, and it will be affordable housing in perpetuity to keep those neighborhoods affordable. So it's a combination of being very intentional with that. But that was how we stabilized that. The neighborhood initially was to put in the affordable housing, put in the tools such as the historic district, and create a capital stack along with the abatement. That's the long and short.
So just real quick, I want to be respectful of people's time. It is 8 o'clock. We're willing to continue going. The panel has offered to answer questions if there were any questions. But knowing that the program is supposed to conclude at 8 o'clock, but we are willing to keep going if there are questions.
In the Grove and you have the different, since you're right there, you have affordable housing, you have new housing, you have the existing housing. As far as market price and cost, you have apartments. What's the difference in basically someone buying a brand new home in the Grove versus someone that's moving into an affordable home versus the rent and so forth, and the newer type of apartments that are and the existing apartments that are already there?
Sure, I can talk a little. I'll start. So this is also a historical piece. So the development, the Forest Park Southeast Housing Corporation, which then became Forest Park Southeast Development Corp., did a lot of the lion's share of the affordable for sale homes in the Grove in the 90s and part of the 2000s. So so that particular portion initially was put in. So a lot of those homes are historically, they were affordable for sale homes. And at that time, people were buying homes for 60, 70,000. They may put $200,000 in the home, 180,000 in the home, but they ultimately were selling it at a loss. So you have a group of people, particularly in the Gibson Heights, the northern portion side of Manchester, that have been able to get that value. The workforce housing, that is between 80 to 120% of the area AMI that a person can have on the apartment side. The market rate housings are the market rate houses that can be anywhere between $2 a square foot and $2.50 a square foot. Then with the existing homes that people are buying, depends on the build. There are some homes that are selling for $600,000, others that are bungalows that are maybe 280. It depends on that space. So that's kind of the different ranges. Then of course you have the affordable housing that is rental. That's there, and that is typically your 60 or 80% of AMI down to the 40% of that area. So that's how that kind of shakes out. Right now, there is certainly a need for affordable for sale housing in the Grove. Right now, you just can't buy any. Everything else around it is industrial. So one of the solutions is going to be if you can ever work with the railroad, and even when we talk about Cortex and the incubator, where do you grow these businesses out to make them affordable, is how do we ultimately convert that in those industrial spaces into spaces where we can add additional affordable for sale housing that is for sale, but as well as creating spaces for businesses to be able to come, because even anti-displacement, we talk about houses, but we also have to talk about small business too, where they can come. I think we've seen it in the Central West End where those values have gotten up so much in certain areas that the mom and pop can't come. So that's just my short answer to them, and I hope it answered the question a little.
Good. Another question?
Hey, my name is Ryan Schultz. I'm with a company called the Insect Developments, and we've rehabbed a few houses in the Grove. I'm actually building my house off the lawn right now. So I'm just right where everything's going. We actually acquired a building. It's a little north of the Central West End. It's about 17,000 square feet. It's a shell right now, but we're looking for a tenant. Who would be the best to like work with it? It'd be something like, working with you on something like that as far as building goes?
Yeah, you can work with it. One of the things, although we work in the Grove, our original neighborhood is actually the Central West End.
Yeah.
So, we're happy to work with you to make sure that the people you need to talk to, we can talk to, get you connected to them.
Yeah. Thanks.
And if you need architects.
David.
So I have one question that just came in. It takes, say, 30 million for 5 years or 300 million for 10 years or whatever figure to get beyond the tipping point to move from subsidized development to market sustainable development.
Can you repeat?
Yeah, so is the question about what is the investment required or the lease payback required to get to that tipping point?
Basically, yes.
Anecdotally, in Cortex, I know that they're trying to stop TIP beyond historic preservation credits, right? So historic preservation, yes, we want to save those old buildings. A lot of times it's more expensive, or if we want to do them in a historically recognized way, it costs a little more, so we get some tax credit from that. I had mentioned that lease rates in Cortex are second highest only to Clayton in the region. And that was roughly taking place after 2018, 2019. So if you think about Cortex really kicking off development with its first building in 2006, that's about 13 years. I can't tell you the amount of tax abatement that was given to Cortex. Yeah. Wish I could. I wish I knew the exact calculus. But one thing I can say is that it's interesting to look at the ebbs and flows, right? The 5 institutions I have read invested $25 million at the beginning of Cortex in roughly 2002 when they founded it. That was to purchase land, that was to set aside dollars for developing buildings and doing tenant fit out. And I don't know all the calculus of that. I know it went into the Cortex Commons, common space, infrastructural space, but it was important, and it got Cortex where it needed to go without developers having to pay that loss. Now the question is, how does Cortex make money, right? Without necessarily having to go back to their anchor institutions all the time. They make money off of parking revenue. They make money off from Innovation Hall and from some of the programming that they do. They make money from buildings and some of the agreements that they have where they developed space. So I do know that there have been some ebbs and flows with that because of the pandemic as well. And what will be interesting to see is what kind of space truly comes back. Space like lab space is physical space that you have to be physically present in to do your experiments, to do your research. But labs are very non-dense, right? We might have one floor of the 4240 building dedicated to one lab tenant, but the max number of employees are going to have in there at 55,000 square feet is about 50 to 60 researchers. That's 1 per 1,000 square feet, whereas we design office space at very dense 1 to 100, sometimes less than that, maybe 1 to 150, one person 150 square feet of space. That says a lot about density, restaurants, other commercial space, job, living spaces. You know, if you have 1,000 people versus 100 people, you're going to need more. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
So, Tim, you kind of talked about the landing and how it was, how it is now, and how do we keep that from happening to the other, to Cortex or to Grove or to the other neighborhoods that are now thriving? What lessons learned can we utilize from the landing? I understand now they're looking at a developer coming in, doing a lot of housing down there. I think that what originally happened there is it didn't have the live, work, play. It had play. It didn't have much live. And so, what kind of lessons learned can we gather from that?
Abdul and John probably have perspectives on this as well, but I think one of them is that growth needs to be careful to leverage its fringes, to take advantage of things that are nearby and grow organically, not making leaps that are so far that you create gaps. As architects and urban planners, we often think about, well, how do we fill gaps? We call them the missing tooth in an urban fabric or something like that. But when we develop or permit development that's too far away, we've just created a gap, right? So why would you put a tooth all the way, this far away from another one when you could put it right up to the other ones that you're using? So, this leans on the City of St. Louis Planning Division, right? It leans on NGOs like Park Central to try to continue to remind developers that they're more likely to have success when they build closer to things that are already successful, right?
Yeah, and I think you build from a position of strength. That's what I've seen. The other thing, as a city and even as a region, particularly as a city, we have to address is that we are a declining population. At this point, what is it, 300, 350, 100 people are leaving the city a month. We're about 280,000 population. How do we stop that, right? And you can have a city, but if the city is built for 1 million people, you only got 280 people in it. 280,000 people in it. That becomes the question. How do you do that? So this is more than just a planning solution. This is also a leadership issue, not in the city that, that has to be addressed long term. This isn't just a 3 or 4 year issue, because if I always say this one thing, and no one ever raises their hand. Who's sending their kid to Bashan High School? No one raises their hand. And that in itself is your problem, right? Who's sending their kid to Kirkwood? That's, so when you ask those questions, that's your answer, because until you get families, until you start attracting families who are going to send their kids, the growth of this city will not happen exponentially to repopulate the city. So that's what we have. We have a issue, and this isn't something that you can blame on this administration. You can't blame that on the last administration. You can't even blame it on the next administration that's going to come in. This has been a regional issue in which we have not grappled with. And even if you look at the desegregation program, and I'm going to wrap up in 1 second, but I need to make this point. It was our parochialism and some of our worst attributes of us as a region and as a city that we didn't deal with. But had that judge said, I'm gonna have a unified school district, we would have had shared pain and shared success, and we would have found a way to educate our kids all together, and what those kids and families mean, people. And that's what we're dealing with. I mean, that is a underlying piece in that we have not been able to work past our parochialism. And that's what we have to solve. That's my last final closing thought.
Well, and I do think, David, you have more.
Also, our AIA St. Louis Executive Director, Karen Taylor Lucas, has a question. So I will put that on now. What is the ratio of affordable housing to the income gap that exists in African American communities? There has been a lot of flight to North County because it is considered affordable housing. And also what is being done regarding short-term rental, mainly Airbnb, updating that inventory of affordable homes.
I'll go backwards on this. It is in North County, St. Charles County, St. Louis, North St. Louis City lost 24,000 African Americans. St. Charles County gained 24,000 African Americans in the last census. So this is a regional issue. What you're seeing in St. Louis City is really a macrocosm, but what you're seeing in St. Louis County now, even with that flight where people are leaving, is a microcosm. And if we can look as a region to see what has happened here and take some take some action, that's one piece. So I'm going to look at this from a municipal standpoint, and there are several pieces that you can do. The first thing is that this is a resource issue. So from a systematic standpoint, since we're looking at, ultimately this is a issue of resources and the issue of economics, St. Louis City, if it is to be able to ever prosper, needs to go back into St. Louis County. So some of those things that need to free up in the general fund where you can start doing things from a municipal standpoint, because this isn't an individual developer piece. This is a municipal, and this is a leadership issue where you can bond affordable housing, right? We can bond a lot of different things if we want, right? You can bond affordable housing, even cities. While it's not popular, you do have something that's called eminent domain that you can declare for the greater good. See, we never use these tools for the poor and unwashed, right? But it has to be a mix. It can't just be for the poor and unwashed. It has to be a mix. And we can build these neighborhoods. So for instance, the city could take all of the Ville right now, right? Because it's nothing there. I mean, I'm from North St. Louis, lived there for a long time. And it's like a bomb went off. But what if they said, hey, we're going to have these acres. We want market rate housing, affordable housing, and they put the different pieces in place. That's what happened in the Grove. The Union at the Grove, that was a bunch of land that was there. And believe it or not, WashU said, we want to, based on the neighborhood plan that Park Central and these residents have done, this is what we want all of this land to look like. So back to what that gap is, that gap ultimately comes down to, where we're at now is that I personally don't think that you have enough housing in general in the city to push those that cost down, but because you don't have enough people in the place, to really make it work. So what do people do? They stay in these areas around job centers and areas that are already there. So I may or may not answer it, but some things are not an issue of matrix, it's an issue of process and resource allocation. And where does leadership stand on that piece? And that's just my city manager answer. I haven't ran a city, so.
Okay. I'm gonna wrap it. And from the committee side of things, thank you all three for your generosity. These are not paid speaking events, as you know. So there was a lot, sorry, Tim. A lot of work put in by all three of these folks and putting this together tonight. And I can see a certain level of glaze on all of us. This is a lot of information in a short period of time. So thank you very much, and gives us a lot of hope and encouragement in the fabric of St. Louis. And I think we witnessed an incredible success story, and let's hope it continues to grow. And just as Bill was asking about McLeod's Landing, hopefully we'll fill in all these gaps and continue to grow and become the city we all dream of. So again, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Sorry, there are surveys. I think you all have gotten these. So hopefully everybody filled out their surveys. Feel free to give them feedback. Yeah, and there's.
Yeah. People know a lot of stuff.